And then I'm going to get us live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let's see, share on a page. All right, we should be live.
And unfortunately, our trusted leader of all things marketing, Cindy, is not able to join us today. So while the cat's away, the mice may play.
Oh, Sam. She's going to
I
hear.
know.
She will hear that. All right,
Yeah,
let's give it
apparently she
just
was double booked.
another minute to get everybody in here since it's just now right at the top of the hour, and then we will get started.
How many slides am I showing, Mandy? Did I do it right? Is it one slide or two slides up there?
Just one. You're doing it right.
Perfect.
I think this is what, our 14th webinar now, and we finally are starting to not have malfunctions at the beginning of them.
Finally figured it out.
Yeah. All
All
right,
right,
let's get started.
let's do it.
Yes,
Let's
we are
go.
so excited to have you all here today. We do have a very special guest with us, our very own Director of Cybersecurity, Tammy Jutras. Tammy has been in the security business for many, many, many years, and she has got a lot of great insights and stories that she is going to share with all of you today. I know you guys are all going to get one or two takeaways from this webinar with Tammy on things that you can do to protect your firm from a breach. You know, before we even dive into this morning, I was on a call with a client and they were breached at the beginning of this year. 6 months later, they are still dealing with the fallout and financial repercussions of that one single breach. And they're a tax firm too, so it was super scary for them. So hopefully Tammy can give us all some insights of what we can do to prevent that so that none of you are in that situation this time next year. And then, as always, myself and Sam will be here. Sam is our Director of Product and Solutioning, and I am our Executive Account Manager for the accounting vertical here at Visory. So just to do a quick rundown of the agenda of what we're going to cover with you guys today. First of all, we're going to give you guys a good understanding of what managed IT means. There's so many people out there who don't really have a good grasp of what it means to have a managed IT firm. So Tammy's going to run through that with us. And then we're going to give you guys the best practices for securing your sensitive data as well as your client's sensitive data. And then we're going to discuss the importance of employee training and security awareness. And then we have some real world examples and case studies. And then we're going to help you guys develop an action plan on how you guys can take some of these practices and go back and use them in your firm.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandy.
You're
And so
welcome.
to kick us off on managed IT, managed security and managed IT, I think it's a lot like hiring an accountant. And so if you'll bear with me, people hire accountants and bookkeepers because why? They're the experts with the numbers, right? They ensure tax and payroll compliance. They make sure business assets are protected. So if you think about it in those terms, it's a lot like hiring someone to manage security and manage IT. It's hiring an expert in vulnerability detection and network monitoring and threat response. And I think that in doing so, you're doing what? You're protecting financial records. You're ensuring compliance and cost effectiveness. A lot like accounting.
Yeah, that's right, Sam. And, it really brings that operational efficiency to your business so that you can focus on growing your core business. And then you have that trusted voice when you need some help navigating all the rules and regulations, FTC, IRS, all of those other things, right? You have someone that you can ask that can really be that partner with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess that brings us to, what does the threat landscape look like? What are those top security threats? And I think that, there's a million kinds of threats, right? There's really complicated, crazy stuff like SQL injections and man in the middle attacks. And what's that one, Tammy? The email bombing, right?
Yeah, that's relatively new. And that one's ridiculous because you will just get inundated. You get signed up for all of these newsletters and you just get inundated with email. It's almost like a DDoS attack to your email. Very, very difficult to stop. That's the new
Yeah,
one.
that one's nuts. And so I think that most of the ones that we have on here, these are the top ones based on what we're seeing. I think that, most of these, it can all be boiled down to email being the big vulnerability, and it happens through social engineering.
Yeah, and they don't have to be very complicated, like you mentioned, SQL injection and script hosting and all of this stuff. Like that's some fancy stuff, but it can be just as simple as someone sending you a email with a link in it that prompts you to log into your Microsoft 365 account. You log in and boom, those credentials are stolen. It really is that simple. It's not the complicated things that we hear on the news. It's the little simple things that will just slide in under the radar in your normal day-to-day work.
Yeah, in fact, one of the types of phishing is actually vishing, so with a V, so voice phishing. And I was reading about the MGM attack that happened last year, and it actually was a vishing attack. So, we're going to talk about cybersecurity awareness training a little bit later in this hour. But just to catch you up in case you haven't read the details on it, essentially, the bad actors were trying to get the credentials of an individual that worked for MGM. And so they called the help desk and posed as this person. They posed as that person, and they were able to do that successfully through social engineering because of all the information that's available through social media. So the person that they were targeting was on vacation with their family, and they had information about where and how long, all off of things like LinkedIn and Facebook, and were able to successfully get the help desk to circumvent multi-factor authentication and give up credentials. And that's what eventually allowed that piece of that attack, that piece of malware, to get into the MGM network. So we're going to talk about phishing and malware and ransomware and all those types of things, but keep in mind that it's not all email, although that's really one of the top entry points, I would say. There are other ways that bad actors can use social engineering. And from a study I was reading recently, it's really interesting that small and medium-sized businesses face 3.5 times more social engineering attacks than large enterprises. And I think that the reason for that is that most small and medium-sized businesses have not invested in best of breed solutions that are available and easily attainable by larger enterprises. So things like mail filtering, right? Having a high quality mail filtering software in your network is going to reduce the number of non-productive emails and phishing attempts that are going to be actually hitting inboxes for your teams.
Yeah, and Sam, one of the things you noted was, using credible information. That is one of the best ways because they come across as knowledgeable, they come across as trusted. If someone knows this information, they must be credible. They must really know this stuff. And so much information is publicly available, right? One of the terms in the industry is called OSINT, and it's basically information that's publicly able to be gathered, right? Your cell phone number, things like dates of births, and all those kinds of things are just all out there, email addresses. It's very, very easy to find this information about companies, people, and link people together.
Yeah, crazy easy. And I guess that brings us perfectly to the evolution of all these attacks.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a great slide because it's really not just one thing that really brings us to where we are today, right? The cybersecurity solutions that maybe you were using last year or the year before, they have to constantly be evaluated because they're not going to possibly work the same this year, right? There's new evolving things that are coming out. As soon as, you know, companies put in layers to stop people, whether it's MFA or, you know, stronger password rules or other ways to authenticate, you know, the bad actors just find another way around it, right? So we have to constantly keep putting new layers in place, you know, updating software, updating layers, things like that. It's really not something that you just set and forget and say, okay, I took care of this, I'm all set, you know, forever and ever, right? As the threats continue to evolve, as the targets expand, right? Now think about it. Everybody is working off, you know, phones and in remote locations now. There's a lot of different ways that you can be working. So that target now is a lot bigger than it used to be. Mobile devices are becoming a larger part of that target because, you know, people are in a hurry. They're looking at things kind of on the go, right? It's a mobile device. So there's not as many, it's not as quick and easy to sort of spot a red flag when you're looking at things on your mobile device. And there's different ways that they can sort of get access to that device. They're going through, you know, apps in a Play Store and things like that. So it's a very different sort of landscape. So all of these things evolve. As I'm sure you're all aware, the AI is really going to bring a whole new level to this, right? Both from the bad actors side as well as, you know, sort of the defense side, because as you know, anything that can be used for good can also be used for bad. So the AI is going to bring, you know, new things to this field as that technology advances. So that human factor, kind of as we make our way around the circle here, becomes, you know, increasingly important, because as we put in layers, whether it's a hardware layer or a software layer, you know, those tend to do what they're programmed to do, right? They kind of look at their rules and they say, all right, this matches, I need to keep this out. This is a bad thing. I got to reject it. It has to go out. So it makes it a little more difficult for the bad actors to kind of get their way in, because unless they can modify their technique to kind of trick that system, then it's going to keep them out. Whereas it's a lot easier for them to target the human who is on the inside, and they can open the door, right? So they're going to appeal to your sense of wanting to be helpful, wanting to provide information. You know, some of the CEO scams we see, I've actually seen a very large uptick in when someone starts a new job. They put this information out in multiple places, right? They're going to put it out on LinkedIn. The company might even do a press release. The company might have them on their website as, you know, a new role. They might be on Facebook or other social media, right? They're, you know, people are happy. They're celebrating. They're starting a new position. And the bad actors are able to sort of, you know, screen scrape this information. And these new employees are being targeted with these CEO scams within their first week of hire, right? So here's this new employee. They're all excited of their new job, and they're getting these texts on their text messages on their phone, pretending to be the CEO or some other important person in the company, asking them for information, or, hey, you know, can you respond to me, or send me your cell phone number. And so these folks are brand new and they want to do a good job. They don't want to, you know, appear silly in front of the CEO. So sometimes they fall for these, and, you know, these bad actors are really going after that. They're socially engineering this whole psychological component, right? So those are the kinds of things that the humans are easier to get at, right? That person is already in the organization. They can choose to click something. They can choose to provide a password. They can choose to send documents that maybe contain personal information. So those are the kinds of things that they use, you know, to sort of deceive and appear trustworthy to people, to steal that kind of information. So those are the kinds of things that you know, you just need to really make sure that you're putting layers in. I know we're going to talk later about the training, and that's why it's so important, because that person is a thinking person. They change, they can make decisions, they can make choices that software and technology might not necessarily do because they do what they're programmed to do.
So I think what you're saying is it's faster and easier to hack a human than to hack a firewall, number one. Number two, the complexity of threats is only going to continue to evolve because AI being generally available has made it possible now for people who maybe didn't have access or education enough or means to learn coding to start coding. And so now we've got people that maybe wouldn't have been in the malware as a service or ransomware as a service business that are able to get into it. And so we have these, you know, I was reading about it recently, and you spoke to this a little bit. It's like we're not talking about kids in hoodies in their parents' basement anymore, right? We're talking about sophisticated networks of bad actors globally. And in fact, you know, it's a multi-billion-dollar business today, but that's not why it matters to the people on this call. It matters because of the $27,000 or $60,000 attack that's going to paralyze their business. And I think those are the things that we're talking about. And they can be small amounts like that happen from these malware and these phishing and these other types of breaches that maybe aren't as sophisticated as the MGM attack. But those are the ones that are really gonna cripple our small and medium-sized business friends.
Right. Right. It's definitely a business for sure. You got that right. And you know, these folks, there's a lot of times they sit in this almost like a call center, right? They have these scripts, they have like talking scripts. Some of these attacks they're like what we call a drive-by attack. You could be on a website that's been compromised and it injects, you know, that pop-up, that browser hijack to you. And, you know, something pops up that says you need to call this phone number and pretending to be, you know, a legitimate vendor or Microsoft. And, you know, many people do it, right? They, you know, if they don't have someone that they can ask or they can call, they sort of trust that this is a known vendor that's going to help them out. And unfortunately, they take advantage of these people. And, you know, it's really sad, but, you know, once it happens to you, it's, you know, it's devastating, right? Like Mandy said, it can take, you know, months, right, to sort of put yourself back to where you were. So that ounce of prevention is really worth that pound of cure there.
You know,
Absolutely.
Mandy, I know that you want to talk about why this matters to accountants, but Tammy just touched on something that's actually hitting home for me. So the pop-up in the browser with call Microsoft, you've been compromised, that actually just happened to my grandmother a couple of weeks ago. And she called me and she was just so angry. You know, she felt so vulnerable from this because she called the number and they almost immediately needed to remote into her computer, right? And the next thing you know, they're trying to initiate a $20,000 transfer from her Citi account, and I'm like, okay, let's talk through some things that need to happen immediately, right? But then let's address your feelings on this. So yeah, it's you know, these kinds of things, they can be really convincing, and some of that goes back to the credible information, the credible vendor that we were talking about. Yeah. Sorry,
You know, actually, no. There's a movie out right now that's called The Beekeeper. It's a blockbuster movie, and it actually is a movie based on a call center where all these people are sitting in a call center and they are just calling older people to try and take their entire net worth with blockups like that. And that's what the movie is about, how this one guy brings down this whole network of bad actors that are out attacking elderly people. And but it's what is happening really in real life today. And you know, going back to the story I talked about this morning or earlier with that accountant that I talked to this morning, why the security matters so much to her now is because of what she had to deal with from the fallout. First of all of her clients' data was all compromised as well. So she had that loss in reputation. She had to contact each one of her clients and let them know that their financial data had been compromised. You know, that having that loss of reputation could potentially be a major risk for your business because they could be looking for some other accountant that has more security measures put in place. Then they had to contact the IRS and let them know that they had a breach, and they have fines that come back with that. Now the IRS, there's actually, you can go to jail now if you are not in compliance with the IRS 4557 and are checking that box saying that you are. And then the last thing, the money that they were out and what it has cost them to just to get their business back up and running. And it all stemmed from them not having MFA. That was what it was. They thought MFA was just a pain, and they didn't have it enabled, and that's how the bad actor got them.
While you're on MFA, Mandy, PSA, this is my public service announcement for everybody on this call or watches later. If you have not turned on MFA in your LinkedIn account, go turn it on, because we've been seeing stories of LinkedIn profiles being hijacked and it being impossible to take it back. You have spent years of your life building your network. Don't start from scratch. Turn on MFA. That's my PSA.
Well, thank you for that, Sam.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And now you step down from your soapbox.
I can get off of my soapbox now. That's right. And we'll move on to best practices. Now, one of the things that Mandy and I talk a lot about with our accounting friends is the evolving regulations. So we all know that about a year ago, the FTC made effective the requirements that any financial institution, so that's going to mean all of our accounting and bookkeeping friends, based on the way the financial institution is defined. It's kind of crazy language, but when you look at it, you're right there with car dealerships and loan shops. So you have to comply with the FTC Safeguard rule. Now, when we draw comparisons back to the IRS 4557 that our tax friends have to comply with, there's overlap in almost every single area on the technology side. So on the IRS 4557 that you're probably familiar with, it's going to require that you have a VPN, you've got your multi-factor authentication turned on, you've got some kind of a next-gen antivirus or real-time threat hunting appliance on your laptops and desktops. If you have a firewall, maybe you've got it in there too. That you have backups, so good quality backups. And backups are great, but backups are worthless if you don't test recovering from backups. I'll share a quick story on that one. We had a client that had significantly downsized their business, and they took their hosting back in-house. So they just had one person. They were using Sage, and their controller, about 18, 19 months later, decided they were going to exit the business somewhat dramatically, and they were going to delete everything on the server. Business owner said, no problem, we have a backup. Unfortunately, no one had tested backups in 18 months. And so the backup, lo and behold, was corrupt. The nearest backup they could get was almost 2 years old at that point. And they had an audit 3 weeks away. So they were in a real pickle. We couldn't help them because they had offboarded, and because of our SOC compliance, we had deleted all of their data as per policy. So everything was completely gone from our environment long before they had this issue. So yeah, backups, have them turned on, but make sure you can recover from them, I think is the key to backups. Security training, we can't harp on this one enough. As Tammy said, it's faster and cheaper to hack a human. So let's get them trained up so that they know if they're being hacked, right? And then encryption, and with encryption, we're talking about your physical devices, your laptops, your desktops, and we're talking about making sure the disk is encrypted. So if it's ever nabbed, bad actor is going to have a much more difficult time getting to it. And so how many was that? All 6 of those are actually in the FTC Safeguard rule. I think in the 3rd rule that they have, which is the access controls rule. So within the access controls, talks about all the technology. So when we're talking about protection, we're talking about cyber protection, we're talking about people. That's our awareness training. We're talking about processes and policies, and that's where we're talking about enforcing things like multi-factor in your Microsoft from a policy perspective. at the business's tenant level. So all the way inside of Microsoft, we can say, okay, anybody that works for us absolutely has to have MFA before they can access their email or their SharePoint or OneDrive, things like that. But then, we're also talking about tools and technology like the real-time threat hunting. Tammy, I know you're pretty passionate about the threat hunting. Can you share some benefits to using something like a SentinelOne or a CrowdStrike, some of those best of breed threat hunting?
Yeah, I can. So a lot of those types of products, that the threat hunting, the endpoint detection response, sometimes you'll hear them called EDR, which is endpoint detection response, or MDR, managed detection response. They're kind of like antivirus on steroids, right? And the reason that they're much more effective is they have this kind of this real-time processing that happens, right? So anytime you're doing something on your machine, let's say you open an attachment in an email, it's a Word document, it's inspecting what happens when you double click that Word document to open it, right? It should just call word.exe and bring up the document for you. But if something malicious is loaded inside that particular Word document, like a script or even something that, so some of the threats work in such a way that when you click on them, they actually go out to a command and control server and sort of get instructions on what they're supposed to do. Those are most difficult for firms or antivirus to sort of proactively catch, because nothing happens until they go outside and come back in. But this EDR is watching to see what happens, right? So a Word document should call word.exe, but if it's talking to the registry or if it's doing some other things that are not expected, that can then be stopped and shut down. And it also pulls information from a lot of sources. So the way traditional antivirus has worked has been, okay, something bad has to have been found by somebody, right? Sam has to fall into a trap and have something bad happen so that information can make it to a list, right? Like a bad list, a file. And so then other people can benefit from Sam's, stepping into that. And then those things, those hashes can be known, right? But this is more looking at different sort of frameworks and globally, right? It's looking at all the information from all the people that use it, and it's sort of pre-storing that information and the behavior, not necessarily just a hash file, but those behaviors, what happens and what should happen. So it's much more, I'm going to say state of the art, up to date. And it uses a lot of sources. It doesn't just use like a hash file anymore to be able to go out and get that information. And I wanted to touch on one thing, Sam. You said a couple of times that the IRS and the FTC, requirements there's a lot of overlap, and that's kind of by design, right? Because these are really the best practices, and there's a lot that you can put in place, but just doing these minimum, these 6 or, as many as you can are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck, right? There's Fortune 500 companies that, have complete departments and budgets, right, for this kind of stuff. But in our small businesses, what can we do to protect ourselves at the most basic level? And some of these, really don't cost any, if much, money at all, right? Like oftentimes you can turn on encryption, you can make sure that you're using multi-factor, like you said, on your LinkedIn and on any of your cloud providers, that you're working with. You need to make sure that MFA is anywhere and everywhere that it can be. So just do something, right? Like start with something. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, and people ask all the time, if what's the minimum? And in my mind, the minimum is really 3 things. There's 3 things on my minimum. MFA, turn it on everywhere. And like Tammy said, it's going to be included in almost everything that you already have at no additional cost. So turn on MFA. The next one is protecting the endpoint. So having that next gen or that real-time threat hunting agent on the endpoints, and maybe it's through an EDR service or an MDR service, that managed detection and response, through a provider, or maybe you're just you're buying it yourself, you're installing it on all of your laptops. And then the third one is training your employees. So it's the people, it's the tools, and it's making sure that you have got that multiple the multiple factors of authentication on all of your business systems and data. Those are the three. That's the minimum to me. And I think that was really interesting. Splunk, I believe it was a Splunk. The Splunk's a vendor. Anyway, they did a study, and what I thought was really interesting was that 43% of the business leaders that were surveyed viewed cybersecurity, investing in cybersecurity as revenue enablement. And the reason for that was that through investing in cybersecurity, they were reducing the amount of non-productive emails that we were talking about before with the email vulnerabilities, and having some kind of a filtering agent turned on if you decide to invest in that. But it was reducing non-productive email. So it was mitigating risk of downtime from a breach, and they viewed that as revenue enablement. What do you think about that, Tammy?
That's a good point. I guess it's looking at it with the positive spin, right? They're an optimist.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, Sam, one question before we move off the slide. Tammy, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but this is something that I'm starting to get asked more and more in my calls with my accounting friends. What is best practice for cell phones? So if they have their email, their Teams, and all of that tied to the cell phone as well, what is the best security practice for that?
So I would say make sure that they have a lock, like a PIN or a password on their phone. I know a lot of people use the facial recognition. I don't think it's all that secure, because I've seen there's a person that I work with here, and his children can unlock his phone with their face. So that may not always be the safest thing to use. I would also recommend keeping it up to date, right? So just like your Windows updates, your computer updates, right? Vendors fix flaws and introduce new features, oftentimes fixing things that are security vulnerabilities in their software. So they will issue updates. So make sure that you I know with my phone, I have an iOS phone, and I can set it to just automatically update. So I'll get the little note that says, when your cell phone is connected to power and you're not using it, we're going to go ahead and update it later tonight. But if you do see that come out on your phone, just go ahead and schedule it at your earliest convenience, because that's going to keep things patched. It's going to fix vulnerabilities as the vendor finds them. Also, again, I mentioned a little bit earlier, things in the App Store, and just be aware and use good hygiene on your phone, right? We were talking earlier before the show started about social media and all of that stuff, right? Everybody is marketing to get you to install their app and, put it on your phone, right? You can get 2, fish fillets for $5 at McDonald's if you have the app and you order in the app. I am just more of a skeptic, right? I'm really very, very picky about what apps I put on my phone, and they have to really serve a good purpose. I don't just, it's kind of like back in the days when, you would be on your computer and you'd go download that coupon, and, you get $1 off, and, you'd end up getting coupon printer installed, and it had all kinds of malware on it, right? So I am just very picky about what I have on my phone for apps. It's primarily business apps, but I do have a couple of little, sin apps on there, which we won't mention. But I tend to be really careful about that, because everything is harvesting data, right? You have to put information in there. You have another login. And just like anything, right? If it's free and it gives you a free service, you're probably the product, right? So just be careful with where you put your information, who you give your information to, because all of that information now gets put into AI and, gets spread, all over the place.
I'm glad you brought up apps. Mandy, thank you for asking this question.
Yeah.
Our accounting friends go to a lot of conferences, and every conference has an app. What's in terms of hygiene? I mean, is it best practice to really just delete the app once you're done with the conference so it's not lingering there?
Yeah, I would recommend it. you probably do need it for the conference, right? It's kind of hard to, to get away from that these days. And I do as well go to some that require it, but I usually will remove it and, be careful about, I don't always jump on the Wi-Fi. I just use my data, right?
Yeah.
Because the more places that you're sort of connecting your information to it's just another place where something can leak or be not. Because if you don't know how secure it is or how public it is, do you really need it, right? You have a data plan. These days, most data is kind of all you can eat. It's not like you're being charged per, little bit. So I just usually use my phone data plan, and I try not to hop on free Wi-Fi ever. I don't think I ever connect to Wi-Fi, just at my house.
Great tips. Great
Great.
tips. And I think when we get to device management, maybe we should touch on some other remote work tips that folks can take away, like secure access and how to make sure that access is secure even when you have fully distributed teams. So, Tammy, managed security, it looks like we've boiled it down to a couple core components.
Yeah, I would say that continuous monitoring and managing, right? So a lot of these things that we're monitoring and looking for are things that are happening invisibly, right? Every day on your network. Traffic is happening. You might have access points, wireless access points in your office. You've got lots of things connected, right? A lot of cloud apps and things like that. So all of these different things that are connected are all talking, and there's data and there's logs that are just flowing all day long, right? We have a lot of people who will look at sometimes these log reports that we look at with them, and they're like, well, why is it using all this data? I wasn't even in the office, right? But they leave their laptop on, and all of these things are continuing to kind of check back in. They phone home. So there's things that are happening invisibly, even when you're not necessarily working on them, just by the nature of them being installed. So what we have is the SIM logging, right? That is going to help us to have the logs available that we can look at both real time and historically, right? So these are the kinds of things that you have to capture them and log them and keep them before you need to use them, right? So a lot of times we'll have a customer who comes to us, and they're not in our security management program, and they have an issue, or they've got an email compromise, and we're really limited in how much we can dig and how much information that we can find, because we haven't captured the data up front, right? So that's why it's important to really have this stuff before you need it, right? And it can always help you if you do have an incident or an event. You can sort of look backward and say, okay, here's what happened. Here's, what they did or they didn't do on the network. So it really can help you out. That's kind of that real-time threat detection. And of course, things like your regular updates and patches, those are important because, like I mentioned with the cell phones, right? Vendors patch security vulnerabilities, security holes. All of these kinds of things get patched and fixed on a regular basis. So you want to make sure that you're getting those automatically pushed out, so that your machines are kept up to date. And the data recovery and the data backup, having that automated so that it's not a manual thing, is really the best there. We do a lot with most of our clients utilize the Microsoft 365 suite. So there's things in OneDrive, there's things in SharePoint, and of course, email. So we have software that we can back that up with too, in the event that either a disgruntled employee thinks they're going to remove it all on you and I'll fix them. You can go ahead and just recover all of that. Or sometimes you accidentally delete something, or you botch an Excel file so badly that you're like, I just got to start over from yesterday. So, And part of that testing can be incorporated each time you have to recover something, right? So, we've got disaster recovery planning here. Yeah, like that's your big ticket thing. But anytime you recover a file, you're really testing your backup recovery, right? Can you recover to a point in time? But your whole disaster recovery, I would throw that in as a, let's just say, the worst case happened, right? How do I continue to run my business and, either recover, what's been damaged or what's been, modified, or, how do I just kind of keep working from a different location, right? What's my sort of my business continuity plan? And, we can help you with that with written information policies and things like that, right? It's always better to have that information, ready, written down before you need it, because if it is a true disaster, your mind is going in 1,000 places, and it's just so comforting to be able to pull up your checklist of these are all the things I need to think about. This is where all my information is. These are my vendors. And you'll have put it together when you're, calm and cool and collected, and like right before you go on vacation, you're like, oh, I want to get this done so I don't have to think about it, and not when your hair's on fire and you're needing to use it. So it's good to have that before you need to use it.
Yeah, and going through that exercise is really it's about evaluating risk, because as we know, what we talked about in prior webinars, when we've talked about the written information security plan, or that WISP that the FTC requires you all have as financial institutions, is evaluating risk. Because how do you know how to protect your assets unless you understand how they're vulnerable? So that's really the first step, is understanding your risk, and then you can put together your policy, and then from there you can also build your incident response plan. And I think all of that speaks to business resiliency. Really, that's the theme. It's all about building resiliency into your business, so that in the event of something happening, and it doesn't always have to be malicious, Tammy, just like you said. I'm not saying this was me that did this, but there was a time that all of a SharePoint site disappeared because someone was trying to get fancy with their iCloud on their Apple device. That was a personally owned device, a BYOD, if you will, bring your own device to the party kind of situation. And this may have been before we had Microsoft backup. Again, I'm not saying this was me on a Mac with an iCloud that caused turmoil for our CEO who lost a board deck. I'm not saying that was me, just saying that it could happen. So it's not always necessarily malicious. So
could happen to anybody, right?
Yeah, backups. And I guess the other thing that's trending right now is a conversation around, do we let remote workers use personal computers to access business information? Tammy, what's your take on that one?
My take is no. There's always exceptions, of course. But I really feel like it is the type of thing where the company needs to be able to manage the device. They need to be able to protect it, update it whenever, right? And it's hard to do on a BYOD device, right? Because people are using it for multiple purposes. The company doesn't really own it, so it makes it difficult for them to install software, reboot it at will, right? So that makes it really difficult to do. But at the end of the day, the business needs to know that the devices that are connecting to their data are secured in the proper manner, right? I'll give you a little bit of an analogy here, because I love analogies. So if you were hired as a delivery driver for UPS, right, you wouldn't expect to deliver packages in your own vehicle, right? The company purchases identical vehicles that are pre-selected for their reliability, their uniformity, and maybe even, because they're cost effective to maintain and service, right? So, and the company can put GPS trackers on them. They can schedule the maintenance. They're making sure they're insured, right, properly, and they have the necessary shelving and the restraints to protect the packages that they're delivering. So, you might be more comfortable, if you wanted to drive your own car, that might maybe have a better radio or air conditioner or navigation, right? But the company is going to have less control over the maintenance and the reliability of your vehicle, and they can't guarantee consistent delivery experiences. So that's kind of my analogy for that, right? To put it in just a little bit different perspective. So your company really, you have to weigh the benefits of that uniformity and the control against the flexibility and personal preference, right? So just like those fleet vehicles, the choice to provide company owned over BYOD is going to impact that efficiency of your business, the security, and the overall operation, right? And you can get the device back, right? If somebody leaves your employment and it's their machine, are you really sure you got everything off of it that, was company proprietary? But, to kind of wrap this all up, right? Regardless of where you land in that BYOD versus company owned, you can still implement, those basic security measures that we talked about, right? That mobile device management, VPNs, data encryption, continuous employee training on those cybersecurity best practices. And, just kind of weighing, what can I enforce on someone's personal device as my employee, so that we're taking reasonable measures against cyber incidents.
Yeah, and some of that gets into some pretty technical stuff, and our accounting friends went to school for numbers, right? To learn how to protect the assets of their clients, their financial assets,
right,
their business assets. So, if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, there are people that can help. So, bring in an expert, just like your clients bring in you as the expert. There are experts that can help you. I want to, Tammy and Mandy, we're about halfway through the deck because we've been having so much fun, but we have 15 minutes left. So we're going to fly through, I think, a few of these because we've touched on a lot of the core ideas. So employee training, can't say it enough, get your team trained. That's one of those three, bare minimum cybersecurity investments you should be making. It's cheap to do and just pays dividends with risk mitigation. So Mandy, unless you want to add anything to that, we'll jump to MDR. All right, managed detection and response that Tammy was talking about. How can we help with that?
Yeah, so this is really, where you need to implement those reasonable security measures, right? And we've talked a lot about that security is best in a layered approach. And is this approach here is really going to allow for monitoring different aspects of the network, right? You've got your firewalls, you've got your endpoints, you've got your people, you've got your data, right? Your cloud data. So our Secure MDR Plus really has best in class products across all of these components and more, right? As well as the trained, I'll say professionals.
Sure.
The experts, my team here, as well as across Visory, right, where we deal with this stuff all the time, every day. And so we're versed in, what the indicators of compromise are, right, and how we can best work with you. We understand the compliance. So there's a lot more sort of soft skills that go into this than just hardware and software too.
Yeah, but there are a lot of technology layers. So we talked about people, training. Can't say it enough. We talked about policy. So you talked about some policies that can be enforced, things like encryption, things like multi-factor, and that can all be done via policy. But there are other kinds of policies, one of which is like an AI use policy, which we're going to touch on here in a minute as well. So there are policies that relate to how people behave and what people do. There are policies related to what your technology can and can't do that are enforceable most of the time. And then there's the other technology aspects. So when we're talking about multi-layered approaches, when we talk about that one pillar, the technology pillar, I think this is pretty representative of the approach that Visory takes with securing clients. So the AI-driven threat defense, that's the threat hunting that Tammy was talking about, that managed detection and response. Securing our passwords, standardizing where passwords are kept in an organization, using something that's best in breed. As LastPass is an example, Keeper, 1Password, there's a ton of them out there. And the key, the thing that makes them magic is that there's only one password, right? You've got your master password, which is encrypted inside of that password manager's system. So even if their system has been compromised, your passwords are still safe because everything's encrypted. You think about LastPass, they've been hit a few times. They're a key target. People are trying to figure out how to get in there, right? But that's what makes keeping your passwords complex. So having a policy, there we go with policies, right? Having a policy in the organization for what passwords should be. And maybe you've moved to the next level and you're done with passwords. And now you're using passphrases. Passphrases are notably the better option to passwords. Making sure we're not reusing passwords or passphrases. We've got a combination of letters and characters and all that good stuff. And the more characters, the better. More characters, the better. MFA, we talked about that. Conditional access policies. And conditional access policies are interesting because now we're getting the really kind of technical stuff. This is saying, okay, I know who the user is. They know their password and they've MFA'd, right? They've done the two-factor. Does the device they're on meet the requirements the organization has set? Is the disk encrypted? Did the password meet the complexity requirements? What are some other, a couple other examples of some conditional access policies that are enforceable, Tammy?
Yeah, things like the PIN, like with phones, you can say,
Oh, yeah.
is it within, like, you can set how many, but we usually say, is it within like 2 revisions of the current software, right? So you don't let people with really old firmware connect. What else? You can do it by location, right? They have to be, they can't be outside the United States, that kind of thing. So
That's
you can
right. Yeah,
get
I forgot
really,
about the
really granular.
geographic fencing that can be done too for policies. That's great. And then securing the network. And you were talking about this with the logs, right? Anytime you're connected to the internet, you have data. It's happening. And so there's logs and really securing the network becomes important. And we promised we were going to talk a little about a remote work best practice. One of the things that can be implemented, again, relatively inexpensively, is a SASE solution. Tammy, SASE is Secure Access Service Edge. Did I get it right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so SASE. And so what we're talking about there is routing all of your remote workers' traffic through a secure gateway that's in the cloud, that's being managed and monitored, so that, when they're connected to their home Wi-Fi, they're not just connected to their home Wi-Fi. All of that business traffic is being routed through a secure connection. You can think about it like a virtual private network or VPN. And that's going to tenfold make working remotely more secure. And it's something that we enforce with the travel that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can set parameters on that as well, right? Like you can connect certain applications, like some of your major business applications. You can say that my employees have to be connected through, this VPN before they can access the cloud device. So it really helps to strengthen that posture, sort of end to end.
And on those business devices, it can even be used to limit what sites they can go to. So when you're talking about increasing productivity and mitigating risk, you can say, okay, no gambling sites, no social media sites, unless you're in marketing, right? And or everybody can get to LinkedIn, nobody can get to Facebook. So there's all kinds of cool stuff that can happen in there. All right, so I think we're at real world examples. So Tammy, do you have a quick anecdote about real world situation to share?
Oh, I have so many. I think the one that jumps to mind for me that probably will resonate with people and that I hope sticks with you, because I don't want you to do it, is I talked with someone who received an email, from somebody that they regularly correspond with, right? So the sender looked familiar, but it was like a link to a Dropbox document. They weren't quite sure. They didn't really know what it was. So they replied to the email and they said, is this for me? Did you mean to send this to me? And the reply came back, yes, go ahead and open it up. So the person did, and they obviously got their account compromised because it prompted them for their password. What really happened was the bad actor was still in that other person's compromised email account, and they replied to the email as the sender. So if you get something and your gut is telling you this just doesn't feel right, I mean, you have that instinct for a reason, right? So if you do need to reach out to the person, I recommend always calling them on a known good phone number. Don't even call a phone number that's in the email, because I've seen those become spoofed as well. And you end up calling a bad actor's cell phone number. So always go to your source of truth. What's your known good phone number? Call them up. And many times that person will say, oh, I'm so sorry, my email was hacked or compromised. Don't open that. That's my real
old
world.
school multi-factor authentication, Tammy. Picking
Right.
up the
Yeah.
phone and calling. This is,
I know.
I'm two-factoring this email you sent me.
You know,
Yep.
one other one that I want to put out there, since we do have a bunch of accountants, that has come up quite a bit with upgrade season just being coming. Well, it's done now, but people are sending emails to people that are on, somehow these bad actors found out who was on 2021 QuickBooks, and they are sending them emails as if they are Amazon, saying you can purchase your 2024 subscription here. Amazon doesn't sell desktop licensing, and they had it at a reduced rate of like $350 off of what Intuit is. And they were just spoofing the email address from Amazon. And I know of 4 of our clients that fell for it and bought their QuickBooks
man.
desktop license from that link. And it's like, oh no, and they just lost the $350.
What a timely reminder on that.
Right. Yeah, the
yeah.
bad actors know like what's going on in your world through, just social media and stuff like that. And they're putting together malicious stuff based on that.
100%. Yeah. And so we actually, I think we covered this one pretty well earlier on with how AI is being used by bad actors. It's because it's so readily available to the public. It's really increasing not only the number of attacks, but sophistication and persistence of the attacks. And that's why having that AI-driven threat hunting that we've been talking about this hour is so important as one of those 3 absolute bare minimums. Having an AI-driven threat hunting that's looking at behaviors of attacks, not the signature of the attack. And that's what, Tammy, you were talking about. Old school was we waited for something bad to happen. We knew the signature or the hash of that bad thing and said, oh, we know what to do to fix this, right? We can fix this now. But the AI-driven tools that we've been talking about are actually looking at patterns. And if a malware attack has 16 steps to it, then it might get to step 3 or 4 and say, hey, this looks really familiar. Let me stop this process, look at it a lot closer, and decide what needs to happen next.
Yep, exactly.
I only know that because I've spent so much time with you, by the way. So that brings us to AI use policies. Now, Tammy, I approached you a couple of months ago and said, Tammy, I think we need an AI use policy. And you said, Sam, we already have one. Here's a copy. You signed it. So I had no idea. So ours is pretty simple. It's just baked into our employment agreements. And so that's certainly one way to approach it. Another way, and a way that we've seen some others tackling it, is really just by having a full-on AI use policy that touches on how their employees can and should not use generative AI. And when we're talking about generative AI, it's things like ChatGPT, right? If you're not talking about it with your team, I promise they're using it. Everyone is using it at this point. In fact, it was, I think it was the fastest rate any software had reached 10 million users. It was meteoric in how quickly it got there. I wish we had that graph showing how long it took air travel to get to 10 million users, how long it took cell phones, how long it took Facebook, and then how long it took ChatGPT. And Threads actually beat ChatGPT, Threads, that new Facebook thing that I haven't even opened yet. So yeah, just meteoric in rise. It's crazy. So AI use policy, and we've got an example here that our friend Liz Scott got for us. And so we've got that in there, the QR code. And we're going to send out tomorrow. There will be this stuff's going to come out to you in an email too. So if you don't scan it here, all good. It'll be in your inbox. And the other thing that we have, well, before we jump to that, yeah, we're running out of time. Okay, two more things. So evaluating your risk, we talked about that when creating your written information security plan. We've got a quick made for business leaders, not super in the weeds technical thing that you can do to sort of scorecard your risk, see where you stand, see where you might need some help. Feel free to use that as well. And then finally, if you are going to be at Scaling New Heights, so are we, come by and see me and Nick and Cindy and Bob. We're going to be at booth 123, and we have a breakfast session. So we're going to be talking about all of this in a little more depth, and we're even going to be playing Jeopardy at the booth. So come by and see us if you're going to be at Scaling New Heights next week. And here's some contact information from Andy if you want to talk more. And we're at the top of the hour. Tammy, can't thank you enough, as always.
Yes, Tammy, thank you so much.
My
And
pleasure.
thank you all for joining us today. We hope you got a little bit of information that you can take back and put to use in your business. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.